Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm excited for this next session. This is always one of my favorite sessions where we talk about where the consumer kitchen is going and how technology will change all of that. This is a really esteemed panel of folks I really respect in terms of their opinions, and let's do some quick introductions so you guys have that context of who we're talking with, and then we'll jump into the conversation. So Sam with Copper, tell us a little bit about what you do.
Hey everyone, I'm Sam Calisch. I founded and run a company called Copper. We make an induction stove with a big battery inside of it. That makes it an extremely powerful, extremely precise cooking experience. It also makes it a very easy cooking experience to have access to, especially for people coming from gas and making the switch to induction. The battery allows you to plug into the outlet you already have behind your gas stove. And so we want to broaden access to induction technology, the magic of induction cooking, and we also want to put out the best induction available. So that's what we're doing.
Great. Robin Liss with Suvie.
I'm Robin, the CEO and founder of Suvie. We're a cool-to-cook kitchen appliance. You load your food in the morning, the night before, you tell it what time you want to eat dinner, and you walk home to a fully cooked meal. We work with a frozen meal subscription to make everything incredibly easy. You can get a home-cooked meal in 2 to 3 minutes.
And finally, Chris Young on the end.
Let's see, my name's Chris Young. I am a chef and scientist who makes smart cooking tools, and I have done so for a while. My current company, Combustion Inc., we make a multi-sensor wireless thermometer that uses machine learning to do things like tell you when your roast will be done, or how much it will carry over cooking, and whether it's safe to eat and has reached pasteurization or not, things like that. So we're trying to go beyond just telling you what the temperature of the food is to how the food is going to be.
Thanks. As I was thinking about this session in the future, actually went back in my mind in the past, and we've all seen these videos, like maybe from World's Fairs in the past, where like Whirlpool shows like what the future of the kitchen will look like in 1960, and like all these really cool inventions. But some of the things they show in these videos that are like 40, 50 years old still haven't come to pass, like robotic cooking, etc. So I want to kind of pick your guys' brains of why the consumer kitchen is a hard place to kind of get new innovation accepted. Why is that so? Chris, I'll start with you.
I think part of the, there's a lot of different reasons, but I think one thing, if I just look at sort of the appliance and the technology space there, partly it's because it's a zero-sum game. The leading companies tend to have something of a monopolistic position. There's 4 or 5 companies that really matter. And if one company's winning, the other company's losing. So there's not a lot of driving force for innovation. And in particular, a lot of the big appliances we tend to have in our kitchen aren't actually chosen by consumers and the end user. They're chosen by the real estate developer, who tends to be very price sensitive. So there isn't the same kind of pressure in the big appliances where you could drive innovation as there is in smaller appliances. And I think if you look over the last 20 years, the real innovation has been in things like Instant Pot and air fryers and small appliances where the consumer can make the purchase. But there's a lot of downsides to small appliances. You know, they're limited by the power they can get out of the wall, 15 amp circuit. They're not under a hood. They don't tend to have ventilation. And so there's limits to what you can do in that form factor. So I think one of the issues is it tends to be market dynamics that has done it. And I think the other part of it is the real innovation is the stuff we're not talking about. It's the apps on our phone, the fact that I can just pull out my phone, hit a button, and a meal shows up. That sort of takes away a lot of the consumer need for the innovation at least in the appliance space.
Robin, I bet you have some thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think, Chris, you raised some really great points. And the replacement rate on those built-in appliances can be 10 to 15 years. And so it's a huge barrier to people replacing their built-in technology. I agree, that's why we've seen so much wonderful innovation on the countertop. I think another thing is that these habits just take a very long time to change, right? We learn to cook from our mothers, our grandmothers, our fathers, and those are ingrained habits in us, and they're also tied up with a lot of people's conception of family and love and motherhood. And you know, it's very hard to kind of bring through new technologies when people connect it so much with love and caring. And then the other thing I'd say is that, to the point about those apps, a lot of the companies that I think have entered the space have tried to fix one vertical problem, right? The mobile planning of the meal, or a Wi-Fi connected appliance, or delivery of food. It's such a complicated ecosystem that we believe that the only way to really make technology bring great consumer benefits is to get those appliances talking to the food, talking to the mobile phone, and getting those three industries to talk, getting them literally to communicate with each other by scanning or image recognition or whatever. It's very difficult.
Yeah. Sam, I think the induction stove is another great example of a pretty cool innovation that a lot of consumers just haven't embraced, at least in North America, for I think a myriad variety of reasons. Can you talk to like some of the market forces and maybe the consumer biases that have led them not to embrace this pretty cool technology?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, induction is magic, but you just don't see it in the US. And if you talk to people in Europe, they don't understand why it hasn't taken off here. And a lot of it literally has to do with our electrical system. To get induction, you need to supply a lot of power to that cooktop. And to do so, you need to wire a new outlet. You need to, in a lot of cases, even update the whole service to your home. And that's just not something people are going to do on a whim, especially for a new technology that maybe they don't have a neighbor who's telling them it's good. And so decoupling those things from the built infrastructure, to your point, is a really great way we can encourage adoption of these new technologies. Also, making sure we're doing a good job fitting this into the way people like to cook, the way people associate cooking with family. I think a lot of induction has been a little shitty for this reason. It's, bad touch screens and just really doesn't fit in with the way people want to cook. And so we need to think about that when we're designing products if we want people to adopt the technology.
But one of the really interesting things with induction is the entire political fight that happened, I guess about a year ago now, right? And yeah, we can laugh at it, but it does tie to the fact of how much of this is an emotional thing related to the way we live our lives and our traditions. And the idea that you are going to force this technology, which we all know is fantastic technology, but force it into people's homes, create this political outcry, really across the nation. And it's just one of those evidence points of what you're dealing with regards to the human emotion, tradition that is tied to food and food preparation.
Yeah, and Sam, like you were a former lobbyist, you're in a sense, and you didn't even speak of like the outside actors that oftentimes are incumbent actors that have monopolies that want to keep those monopolies in place. Those are market forces that consumers don't necessarily think about, but like to your point, Robin, have impacts on the market.
Yeah, absolutely. Millions and millions of dollars flowing in to solidifying this perception that gas is king. An interesting outcome of this polarization, I mean, we live in such a polarized place, but I would say the middle was with gas before this gas stove gate thing that happened. But once Ted Cruz aligned himself with gas, a lot of the middle came to induction. So it's kind of remarkable how these things play out. And I think if we're talking long term, that is what we need. Like, we were talking single digit percentages before that, and now we're seeing significant portions of people interested in trying induction. And that's the way we're going to win everyone over, is when everyone has experience with how magical it is.
Well, it made me think of something. I mean, I've started to see professional kitchens move towards induction, and to that larger point of like what happens in professional kitchens seeping down into the consumer market. Chris, do you think, does that happen much? Do we see innovation that happens in professional kitchens that ultimately end up in consumer kitchens?
I think so as a former chef who worked in 3 Michelin star restaurants, and I cooked in Europe, but of course I'm American, I had many friends cooking in the US. There's I think 2 parts to this. On the induction side, cooking in Europe, induction was far more common in the early 2000s. And there was a lot of infrastructure reasons that drove kitchens to adopt that in Europe, and frankly, it was a lot better to cook in those kitchens. They weren't as hot. They were much more comfortable than some of the U.S. kitchens I cooked in that were all gas. And so, the reason I think you haven't seen it at the professional level switch as quickly to induction in the U.S. is driven by very practical considerations of the power needs. 3-phase power, large amperages services that you would need for a commercial kitchen. But I do think consumers are influenced by what's going on in professional kitchens, and I do think as induction becomes more prevalent even in US professional kitchens, it will continue to trickle down when you're seeing it on TV, when you're seeing Gordon Ramsay cook with it. At the same time, I actually, as a professional chef, a lot of the innovative tools that would wind up in our kitchens or that we would be playing around with were actually us taking consumer tools and doing novel things with them. You know, the Thermomix blender was something that was just a workhorse tool in the kitchen. It's fundamentally a consumer tool. It's not actually a great professional tool. We break them at a pretty high rate. So I think it tends to go, as a chef, for the really big technology, rationale, combi ovens, things like that, that tends to be professional equipment that trickles down to consumers over time as it becomes more accessible. But it does go the other way. A lot of the gadgets, a lot of the tools put in the hands of a really creative chef, you know, it can be interesting what they will do with, be able to do with that tool.
Robin, have you had any instances of the Suvie showing up in like professional kitchens?
Not a ton. We definitely don't encourage it because there's a big for household use only on there. But I mean, we definitely have talked to chefs that are using them, and there's some very interesting commercial applications. But I think you know, we choose to innovate right in the consumer home.
Obviously, at CES this year, it seems like AI is on everyone's minds, and almost to the point of like it seems like it's just a marketing gimmick at this point. But I did listen to Jensen's keynote from NVIDIA, and he was really kind of playing up physical AI, and he basically said that the ChatGPT moment for robotics will happen sooner than we think. So I want to talk a little bit about AI and how that can change the direction of consumer kitchens. Sam, have you given any thought to like how this amazing tool will change how we cook in the future?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of very broad applications. I think it's important, though, as we roll this out, we do it in a way that doesn't feel alienating to people. So we need to roll it in such that it's an enhancing experience to cooking. It's not forced upon you in order to interact with your stove. You shouldn't need to submit a query to cook your mac and cheese. But there's amazing ways we can layer it in the background to enhance the cooking experience, to make it easier, more responsive, more adaptive. And I think these are the places we'll see it first if we do it well.
Yeah, I mean, we're using AI now in many ways in the Suvie platform. And much like we don't think the future of the kitchen are these, you know, robot chopping arms, we also don't think it's an AI chef telling you how to take the ingredients, you know, and come up with a terrible, crazy recipe. What we do think it's about is, you know, food is an inherently personal experience. What one person thinks is overcooked might another person will think is undercooked. And so the ability for us to take the Suvie platform, whether that's what we ship a customer, as in the food that comes out of our, you know, commercial, I mean, our meal subscription service, or how that food is cooked in their appliance, or what food we recommend to them, is starting to use a lot of algorithms and a lot of AI in quiet, simple ways that are enabling us to take a pretty personalized experience and make it incredibly personalized, right? Now, the limitations on that are big, and I'd say this is where I think that the software for AI might be even further ahead than the physical world, right? Because we can only take AI insights and impact your meal if the oven or the cooking device is able to adjust accordingly and in a precise enough way to meet that need. We also can only adjust, you know, what your taste profile is if on our supply chain we have the ability to react to that. Now that is what we built at Suvie. Now the way we did it is we built the entire stack. From the food to the appliance to the mobile, we're controlling that whole thing. But it really positions us in this amazing place now where we're able to take these learning models and apply them to all parts of the customer journey to really personalize it. And I just think unless you're able to touch those things, how the food's cooked, what's cooked, it's gonna be very hard to apply AI to the kitchen.
I always like to, Chris, when I'm talking to you, I think a lot about like your early efforts. That I think you're a little bit too ahead of the market. In particular, my favorite one is the Facebook.
The chatbot.
You do basically, Chris enabled you to cook with a Facebook chatbot with the Suvie appliance. Suvie appliance back in what, 2017, 2018?
2016, 2017.
So I remember
I
had logged into Facebook. I'm saying I'm going to cook a chicken, and Facebook is having a conversation with me and then talking to the appliance. But so I bring that up because like you must look at the tools now you have with ChatGPT and these large language models and go, oh my gosh, it'd be so much easier now.
I think that's, you know, being early is the same as being wrong, you know, and they were, you know, I think the logic there, which is saying, you know, you don't want humans to have to translate their preferences into engineering parameters. You know, should the cooktop be 5 or 6, medium high, or what does that even mean? Should the oven be 250 Fahrenheit or 300 Fahrenheit? How long should it cook? These are actually sort of limitations of the technology that we sort of unquestionably accept. But they're actually a terrible cooking experience, and they're a real impediment to people being successful in the kitchen, and then that tends to make people want to cook less. The idea of the chatbot back in 2016 was we could allow people to express their preferences, and this fit together with things like visual doneness that we did on the smartphones, where you could look at movies of what the food and the texture would be like to choose that. Now in 2025, the capabilities of LLMs to give you very, very reasonable answers makes that a lot more practical, and I do think you're going to see a lot of people starting to implement those kind of human UIs using LLMs in 2025 to sort of solicit what your preference is and then give you guidance on how to do it. I think that's actually pretty much a solved technological problem now that, beforehand was sort of an interesting prototype. To your point, if you can't actually connect that back to the appliance, though, you're incredibly limited in terms of your ability to go make that happen. With our thermometer, we gather a bunch of real-world data. We profile the entire food using 8 sensors, and so we can know what all the temperatures are, and we can use AI and machine learning to do interesting things like tell people when their food will be done. But the step we're still missing is it's not connected to the appliance, and you really need to be able to turn the temperature up or turn the temperature down to get the outcome the customer wants. So it is about integrating all of these things together into a fairly seamless experience. That's starting to happen. We're doing that with Fisher Paykel. We're doing that with some other companies that have been incorporated our product. But I sort of see that as a very, very first step towards making the kitchen genuinely smarter. The software tools are there now. If Jensen's right about the robotic side of things, it's going to get a lot more interesting if you can start to do more complicated tasks using AI.
You want to say Rob? Well, Sam, Robin kind of brought up robotics, and she thinks that there won't be the chopping arms like the Molly of the world, kind of chopping and cooking. What do you think the future of food robotics in the kitchen looks like? Will we have a humanoid robot moving around in 20 years cooking for us? Will we have an installation in the wall chopping things up? What do you think it looks like?
Yeah, I think to get broad adoption of these things, it's going to be things that bring more people together. So I think humanoid robots in the kitchen, no, we need less robots, more humans in the kitchen. Certainly, though, there's ways, gadgets do bring people together. People, in order to exchange around cooking in more deep and nuanced ways, a lot of these robots enable that. So to the extent that's possible, yes, I do think things like chopping, mixing, measuring in particular is a way to deepen the relationships we have to recipes and to sharing recipes. I think is definitely going to catch on.
I want more robots in the kitchen.
Yeah, is that because you call your product a robot?
No, and I think most working dual income families want more help. Cooking can be wonderful and lovely on the weekends when you have time and you're relaxing with family. But those weeknight meals, there's these 4 pain points, right? Shopping, planning, cooking, cleaning, right? And most of that is just a chore. Now, outsourcing that to DoorDash and delivery, that's just unhealthy meals and unhappy outcomes. And people just want to spend more times with their loved ones, but I imagine most people on those weeknights, they don't want to be in the kitchen. And so robotic cooking is, I believe, the future, but it's not going to be those arms. It's going to be products like Thermomix. It's going to be products that Suvie are taking those pain points, right, those 4 pain points, and making them a little bit better. The average American woman spends 60 minutes every day in the kitchen, and that's most of her free time that's not spent working, sleeping, or commuting. And if she can take half that time and have robotic kitchen appliances that are automating parts of the cook and get some of that time back, she's going to be able to have a much better life and spend more time with her loved ones, which is what we all want.
Yeah, and I think you made a good point. Chris brought up also Thermomix before. I think you could argue that Thermomix was really the first mass market consumer kitchen robot in a way, because it does string together.
I think the dishwasher got there first.
The dishwasher. From a cooking standpoint, though, I think.
Absolutely. And has a huge install base, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's 1 million+ units out there on the cookie dough platform. And, it's a it's a product that works really well as we like to call it, like kind of, it's a sous chef, right? It's for people who still want to do a lot of the work, but don't want to slave over a bechamel sauce or a reduction, right? But for people who want full automation, we have products like Suvie, which 2 minutes to load, and then everything's done for you.
Chris.
So I think I've actually changed my mind in the last year on robotics in the kitchen. I have spent a lot of time in professional kitchens, chopping onions, peeling carrots, making stock. Like that was my entire 20s. And so I think, and I've also bought a lot of robots for mass production of various products I've made. And robots historically suck. The problem, everybody goes, oh, automate manufacturing, get robots. And the problem is robots are really, really, really dumb. And if you decide you need to change something, if you want to do a task slightly differently, you got to reprogram the robot. And that's like really time consuming. Whereas if you want the human to change something, you just tell them to do it differently. And so both in mass production and in kitchens, professional kitchens anyway, are a kind of mass production. Humans are very, very flexible. That's kind of their benefit. And they're very easy to reprogram as long as they're reasonably smart. And I've always sort of felt that this was a really big obstacle towards the fantasy of robotic arms or humanoid robots in the kitchen. And I think I've changed my opinion on that. Not that, we can make the physical robots, and they are getting better. The big issue to me was always the training modalities, and can you just show them something and have them do it quickly and have them do it repetitively and have them do that really well? I do think that is within 5 to 10 years now. Previously,
is it because what Jensen and the wife are talking about there?
I think if I'm using AI in my workflow every day at all kinds of levels, and it's we literally have conversations on problems where we go, this is too hard to solve right now, we should wait 6 months and try again. Because the rate of change is so extreme right now, things that were not tractable problems 6 months ago are totally solvable now. And so even as somebody who has a math background, when you're on an exponential curve, it's very, very hard to realize how quickly things are going to change. So the idea of humanoid robots that can take on these sort of these highly flexible tasks in the kitchen, and cooking is all about dealing with variability. Every vegetable is different. The onion's a little different. The carrot's the wrong shape. This is the kind of stuff that I think AI is actually capable of solving now. Can it do it today? No. But I wouldn't bet against 5 years from now.
If you walked into one of our food processing facilities, you would think robots have taken over, right? I mean, if you saw the way that a chicken breast is, water jet cutted, so that it's a perfect size, and you would say, wow, that's robotics. Some of that technology is, 20, 30 years old. What we think of as a continuum of, on the one side of the scale, you have the amount of preparation that's happening in the commercial environment, whether that's a restaurant or, in our case, a farm that's processing our vegetables, or a butcher that's cutting our meat. And on the other side, you have the work that's done by the customer in the home, right? And this is this moving slider, right? So when you're getting a pizza delivered to you, you're doing nothing in the home. All that work is happening somewhat at the pizza shop, but somewhat at their processor when they're buying, pre-rolled out dough from Cisco or something, right? So you move that slider, and as our technology in the home develops, we might be able to be a little bit less pre-processed in the commercial kitchen environment, or for some products, we might be more pre-processed that are harder to do, and we're finishing them in the home. But we're using, robotics, automation are touching your food, in the case of Suvie, both in the pre-processed ingredients that we're sending you, they're raw, they're frozen, it's not like there's a bunch of chemicals in there, but we're having a machine cut them, right, rather than you do it. But you could see one day us having a machine in the home that can do that processing.
Real quickly, referring back to Jensen, and on his keynote, he mentioned this ability with their new chips to basically walk around with a videotape, and the models will remember it. And I know I wrote an article about 6 months ago where Google essentially made this breakthrough where essentially they will allow you to upload a mobile video, and then your robot can remember the physical space. So it's basically giving them a virtual environment. So I can kind of see that happening in our kitchen. Video, feed it to your robot, they know what the physical environment looks like. But I do want to talk about this idea of more interesting things happening at the home, and talk a little bit about maybe 3D food printing or kind of this micro manufacturing in the home. So Chris, you said you did some work with this at Intellectual Ventures and Modern Cuisine, where you basically have some patents there. And you're pretty skeptical about 3D food printing in the home. Do you think, has your mind changed at all?
No, I've actually probably become more skeptical over the years. I think first, if you just look at 3D printing, as it's practiced today industrially, everybody thought it was going to be this really great home technology, and there was a bunch of startups in the 20 teens that sort of blew up on this, but most of those are gone now, and the ones that, there are still hobbyists that get these, but the real action in 3D printing is industrial. The most interesting 3D printers, and we use that technology, we use it in manufacturing. It's become an industrial technology, and with 3D food printers, there was this idea of it's the Star Trek food replicator that everyone wants, but the idea we would print a steak. The problem I sort of always had from it was a first principles problem, which is a lot of the texture, and I'm picking on meat, but this sort of applies broadly to almost any food you want to print. The texture of meat, the properties of meat, they go all the way down to the molecular level, and so to recreate something that is going to be a pretty good facsimile of meat, you've got to recreate all of those structures and all of that texture at all of those different levels. And that takes a lot of energy. And if you want to do it quickly, and we don't want to wait hours for our steaks, you've got to put a lot of energy into a very small area very, very rapidly. It will tend to incinerate things. Like, cows are really efficient at creating meat over about 12 to 18 months. We sort of underappreciate how efficient they are at turning energy into muscle, and so trying to print it, when you sort of do the first principles energy analysis, there's always this issue of, are we just going to end up printing a charcoal briquette because of how much energy we're putting into the print head? And so I think you can create interesting, people have 3D printed pastas, 3D printed chocolate. That's very, very macro level stuff, and it can be interesting, but the idea that we're going to economically and energetically produce something like meat or a plant tissue, no, I don't see it.
So that's a no on the Star Trek food replicator from Chris.
Not that way.
I kind of wish the startup kind of had survived because they were trying to do beverage printing, because beverages make a lot more sense to just put some flavor molecules on something, mix some water in there, maybe some sugar, you have a drink. But they didn't make it. Sam, what do you think on this micro manufacturing in the home of food?
Yeah, I think if we take as analogy the manufacturing industry writ large, there's always been a spectrum between centralized manufacturing and distributed manufacturing, and people use this term 3D printing to describe a pretty broad swath of technologies. So, I do think we will see successful things that you could call food 3D printing. I think the beverages are a great example. But yeah, in terms of recreating microstructure, I think these definitely are things best done industrially. And you see the progress made in fake meats. It's exciting, but I don't see that going all the way to the edge.
Robin, if you were to if you didn't start your company, 6, 7 years ago, you're starting it today, and you have all these tools at your disposal, like the current slate of AI tools, et cetera. What are some ideas for future cooking products you would want to maybe think about?
Well, without revealing too much about what we're working on, I think that what my co-founder Kevin and I did 10 years ago when we founded Suvie, and we do the same thing today, is look at those pain points and what are those really painful areas that we can fix, and in our case, that also can connect to the food ecosystem. That's very important to us so that we can solve or connect that consumable with the appliance, with the mobile experience. Without getting into too many details about what we're working on, I think there's some very exciting additional cooking platforms or cooking appliances where there's opportunity to bring the same food, talking to the appliance, talking to the mobile phone. And then when we can get those three connected, on a multiple nights a week out of a customer, we're able to automate and bring AI technology to enhance that personalization of that experience. But I can't say which appliances we're working on.
All right, hopefully next year you could tell us what those are. Let's talk a bit about a category of product that I have a passion about in terms of why isn't there more innovation? And that's the refrigerator. Seems like the refrigerator's been stuck in time. There is a startup out of Seattle trying to redo it and kind of think more smartly about it. But Sam, you think a lot about sustainability. I think the refrigerator is tied to sustainability in a big way. And why hasn't it changed or been innovated on really in the last 50 years?
Well, I have to push back a little bit in that it has. In terms of, if we think of it in terms of sustainability or energy consumption, really remarkable things have happened with fridges in terms of how much power they use. But it is this thing that is in terms of use case, really stuck in the past. I do think the fridge is an amazing platform for resilience. Resilience as a value being provided to a consumer is something that can motivate a lot of adoption. So we're in our booth, we're showing also with a company called BioLite that's producing a fridge backup battery. That it's a simple idea, but it's pretty powerful. If you've ever had a blackout and had a bunch of food go bad, it's a real disaster. So it's things like that we'll see where resilience can be a vehicle for innovation, I think.
Yeah, I did see that. There's essentially a backup battery for your fridge, and you guys are partnering with them, working with them?
Yeah, we're showing off in North Hall with them, yeah.
So probably good.
Well, I mean, I would say there's been massive innovation in refrigeration with cool-to-cook appliances like Suvie that can take your food from refrigerated to cooked. But also what Sam said. I mean, it's interesting because that is where there's been massive innovation in refrigeration and in cold chain, arguably world-changing innovation, a transition away from greenhouse gas, refrigerants, changing the foam structures. I mean, they've gone from very, very energy hungry, bad for the environment devices to pretty efficient. But that's also why, to your first question, like why we don't have maybe more innovation in robots and more, because the innovation that is happening has happened around, water consumption for washing machines, efficiency for refrigerators. A lot of this technological innovation has been kind of quiet in the background, but it's definitely there.
Yeah, and I guess what I meant to say is there's lots of innovation around the energy side, but around reducing food waste, there hasn't been a lot of innovation in that side. So, Chris, how could you improve refrigerators so there isn't as much waste? Is it just putting cameras in there? Like, how would we do it?
That's stupid. I think the refrigerator and what I saw over the last, when I was paying close attention over the last 10 years is sort of a cautionary tale to how you can get innovation really, really, really wrong. Because you start to, the organizations start to fantasize what they want consumers to want versus what consumers will actually do. Oh, consumers want this to be a TV in their kitchen. Not really. And this is, I think, the bigger sin, consumers will carefully package food. They will scan things. They will keep their fridge orderly so that the camera isn't obstructed by the milk. I'm a professional chef. I have run kitchens where if our fridge wasn't organized right, we would be shut down by the health department. I share a home with my wife and teenage son, and our refrigerator is a flippin' disaster. About once a week I lose my mind and just start ripping everything out and reorganizing it because the average person just jams as much stuff into their fridge as they can. And so the idea that they're going to carefully organize it and use your app to scan it and you'll be able to see the screen and have the camera without opening the door, that's a fantasy of what the company wants versus what consumers' behaviors actually are. And where I've seen things go really wrong in the smart kitchen space is when you start imagining problems that you want consumers to want versus solving the things they actually have. I think a great example is I absolutely want my fridge to keep if the power goes out, which seems to happen on a regular basis in Northeast Seattle, as you know, I would like my fridge to stay cold. If there was a battery, that would be a genuinely useful innovation. Keeping the temperature pretty uniform is useful. Beyond that, I don't want to download an app. I don't want to have to carefully organize and use your proprietary packages because that's a great business model just to use my fridge.
I do think the idea of having smaller batteries partnered up with your appliances does make a lot of sense. I think this idea of like a fridge having its own little battery is really cool. In terms of the future of energy consumption in the home, you think a lot about this, Sam. Can you talk a little bit about how we may see energy distribution in the home, how the kitchen plays into that? Do appliances all have batteries? Do we have like a centralized backup wall? Like, what does it look like?
Yeah, I think when we think of home of the future and energy use there, it's really important to point out that electricity is what switching to electricity from fossil fuels is what makes a lot of flexibility and innovation in how we want to be in the kitchen, how we want to cook. It's what makes it possible. Electric appliances are far more precise, far more interactive, far easier to network with an app or a supply chain. It's making this transition is not just about climate, it's about a better experience and a more flexible, tailorable experience. And so as we make the transition from fossil fuels to electricity, there will be massive opportunities. I happen to think most of the appliances will have a battery in them because that is the most efficient way to push power storage out into our electric system. It will also carry these additional benefits, like you won't have food go bad in a blackout. You won't have to rewire your home to get a new stove. These are the things that will sell it, but from an infrastructural perspective, it's a more efficient way to run the system. And FYI, this is how the internet works also. We send thousands and thousands of times more information through the same network from the 80s just by adding a little bit of local storage throughout the network. It's called caching. And the same thing is going to be true for the electrical system.
Well, we have about 4 minutes left, so I want to do a little bit of crystal ball, future gazing, and have each of you kind of talk a little bit about where you think things are going and what you're excited about. So I'll kind of start with you, Sam, and go towards the end there. If you think about the future of cooking, the future of the consumer kitchen, and all these tools at our disposal, all these technologies we're talking about here at CS, what do you see it looks like in 10 years, and what are you excited about?
I'm excited about anything that brings people closer together through their kitchens. And that could be physical, but that could also be enabled by the internet. That could be enabled by the ability to share recipes, and the ability to host people, the ability to clean up the air, the ability to contribute to a social movement of fighting climate change. All of these things is what I'm excited about.
Robin?
I'm excited about, I think, people being able to have their personal preferences, their dietary preferences, their allergies, their whatever macronutrients they want, and be able to communicate that to their appliances and their online meal ordering platforms, and get really a customized meal down to the individual, where a family of 4 might be sitting down for a lovely meal, but each person is having something custom made for them, just like they were at a restaurant, but in the convenience of their own home, and have a delicious, wonderful meal and more time to spend with each other rather than cooking.
Chris?
I think this probably reflects just a personal current obsession more than a well thought out forecast of the future. But I've written recipes, I've written cookbooks, things like that. And one of the things I'm really excited about is the way the recipe is going to change from there's a creator and it's published out through books, YouTube, TikTok, or whatnot, blogs, to recipes are actually going to be created on demand for the first time ever. One of the things I've benchmarked for the last 2.5 years is the ability for an LLM to create a reasonable recipe that probably works. And 2 years ago it sucked, a year ago it sucked. It's actually pretty good now. I might quibble about some things as a professional chef, but the ability for me to give it some very loose guidance and get back something that's a credible recipe on demand, it's sort of a change from a publishing model to a sort of a streaming on demand model that I think is going to be really interesting.
We have a couple more minutes, so I'm going to keep going and ask you guys a few more questions. I want to use the maximum of my time, but is that because the digital understanding of food is getting better, the models are getting better? What?
Fascinating question. I don't know that it actually understands the food better, but it seems to have a much more nuanced understanding from being trained on potentially millions of recipes to how recipes work, how food responds. It still has, the recipe it will create still has the ambiguities and mistakes that even a human written recipe. Cook for 1 hour at 400 degrees. Well, yeah, kinda, that's roughly right, but it's not wrong either. And so what I'm saying is, I think the AI has converged on accuracy in recipes at the same level that a human recipe writer has converged on it. Because all recipes are broken to some extent. There is no perfect recipe that will work for everyone all the time. There's way too much ambiguity in language.
Yeah. Robin, you didn't tell us what your future roadmap looks like. You won't today because you want to keep that a little bit secret, but you did mention personalization a little bit. And that seems like an area that you're excited about. Is that the future of the kitchen, like personalization around people's preferences, their health biomarkers, what they did today? Is that kind of where things are going?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, I think as we learn more about our bodies and our lifestyles, and people are getting very specific about what they want to eat, both in their taste preferences, but also maybe what their health professionals has told them. And so we can have happier lives, better outcomes as that personalization becomes more and more accessible to more and more people.
Well, I learned a lot today. I always enjoy talking to each of you, and this has been a great panel. Give these guys a big round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.